Hey guys, let's talk about Bob Crane. Robert Edward Crane was born on July 13th, 1928. He was an American actor, drummer, radio personality, and disc jockey known for starring in the CBS situation comedy Hogan's Heroes. Bob was born in Waterbury, Connecticut, the younger of two sons of Rosemary and Alfred Thomas Crane. The original spelling of the family name was Crean. He spent his childhood and teenage years in Stamford. He began playing the drums at the age of 11, and by junior high was organizing local drum and bugle parades with his neighborhood friends. He joined his high school's orchestra and its marching and jazz bands. He also played for the Connecticut and Norwalk Symphony Orchestras as part of their youth orchestra program. He graduated from Stamford High School in 1946. Then, in 1948, he enlisted for 2 years in the Connecticut Army National Guard and was honorably discharged in 1950. The previous year, he married his high school sweetheart, Anne Tirzian. The couple had 3 children, Robert David, Deborah Ann, and Karen Leslie. In 1950, he began his career in radio broadcasting at WLEA in Hornell, New York. He soon moved to Connecticut stations WBIS in Bristol and then WICC in Bridgeport, a 1,000-watt operation with the signal covering the northeastern portion of the New York metropolitan area. In 1956, he was hired by CBS Radio to host the morning show at its West Coast flagship KNX in Los Angeles, California, partly to re-energize that station's ratings and partly to halt his erosion of suburban ratings at WCBS in New York City. In California, Bob filled the broadcast with sly wit, drumming, and such guests as Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, and Bob Hope. His show quickly topped the morning ratings with adult listeners in the Los Angeles area, and Bob became king of the Los Angeles airwaves. Bob's acting ambitions led to guest hosting for Johnny Carson on the daytime game show Who Do You Trust? And appearances on The Twilight Zone, Channing, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and the General Electric Theater. After Carl Reiner appeared on his radio show, Bob persuaded Reiner to book him for a guest appearance on The Dick Van Dyke Show. After seeing Bob's performance on The Dick Van Dyke Show, Donna Reed offered him a guest shot on her program. After the success of that episode, his character, Dr. David Kelsey, was incorporated into the show's storyline, and Bob became a regular cast member, beginning with the episode Friends and Neighbors. Bob continued to work full-time at KNX during his stint on The Donna Reed Show, running back and forth from the KNX studio at Columbia Square to Columbia Studios. He left the show in December 1964. In 1965, Bob was offered the starring role in a television sitcom set in a World War II POW camp. Hogan's Heroes involved the sabotage and espionage missions of Allied soldiers led by Hogan from under the noses of the oblivious Germans guarding them. The show was a hit, finishing in the top 10 in its first year. The series lasted for 6 seasons, and Bob was nominated for an Emmy Award in 1966 and 1967. After having an affair with co-star Cynthia Lynn, the actress who played Helga, Bob became romantically involved with Lynn's replacement, Patricia Olson, in 1968, who played Hilda under the stage name Sigrid Valdis. Bob divorced Tirzian in 1970, just before their 21st anniversary, and married Olson on the set of the show later that year, with Richard Dawson serving as best man. Their son, Scotty, was born in 1971, and they later adopted a daughter, Anna Marie. Bob and Olson separated in 1977, but according to several family members, had reconciled shortly before Bob's death. In 1968, Bob and series co-stars Werner Klemperer, Leon Askin, and John Banner appeared with Elke Sommer in a feature film, The Wicked Dreams of Paula Schultz, set in the divided city of Berlin during the Cold War. In 1969, Bob starred with Abby Dalton in a dinner theater production of Cactus Flower. Following the cancellation of Hogan's Heroes in 1971, Bob appeared in 2 Disney films, Superdad, in the title role, and Gus. In 1973, he purchased the rights to a comedy play called Beginner's Luck and began touring it as its star and director at the Showboat Dinner Theater in St. Petersburg, Florida, the La Mirada Civic Theater in California, the Windmill Dinner Theater in Scottsdale, Arizona, and other dinner theaters around the country. Between theater engagements, Bob guest starred in a number of television shows, including Policewoman, Gibbsville, Quincy M.E., and The Love Boat. In 1975, he returned to television with his own series, The Bob Crane Show, on NBC, which was canceled after 13 episodes. In early 1978, Bob taped a travel documentary in Hawaii and recorded an appearance on the Canadian cooking show Celebrity Cooks. Neither aired in the U.S. following his death. His appearance on Celebrity Cooks did air in Canada in late 1978 and was recreated in the biopic film Autofocus. Bob frequently videotaped and photographed his own sexual escapades. During the run of Hogan's Heroes, Dawson introduced him to John Henry Carpenter, a regional sales manager for Sony Electronics who often helped famous clients with their video equipment. The two men struck up a friendship and began going to bars together. Bob attracted many women due to his celebrity status and he introduced Carpenter to them as his manager. Bob and Carpenter videotaped their joint sexual encounters. Bob's son, Robert, later insisted that all of the women were aware of the videotaping and consented to it, but some said they had no idea that they had been recorded until they were informed by Scottsdale police after Bob's murder. Carpenter later became national sales manager at Ekai, and he arranged his business trips to coincide with Bob's dinner theater touring schedule so that the two could continue videotaping their sexual encounters. In June 1978, Bob was living in the Winfield Place apartments in Scottsdale during a run of beginner's luck at the Windmill Dinner Theater. On the afternoon of June 29th, his co-star Victoria Ann Barry entered his apartment after he failed to show up for a lunch meeting and discovered his body. Bob had been bludgeoned with a weapon that was never identified, though investigators believe it to be a camera tripod. An electrical cord had been tied around his neck. Bob's funeral was held on July 5, 1978, at St. Paul the Apostle Catholic Church in Westwood, Los Angeles. An estimated 200 family members and friends attended, including Patty Duke, John Astin, and Carol O'Connor. Pallbearers included Hogan's Heroes producer Edward Feldman, co-stars Larry Hovis and Robert Clary, and Crane's son Robert. He was interred in Oakwood Memorial Park in Chatsworth, California. Patricia Olson later had his remains relocated to Westwood Village Memorial Park in Westwood, and she was buried beside him in 2007 under her stage name, Sigrid Baldus. The Scottsdale Police Department had no homicide division in 1978, so it was ill-equipped to handle such a high-profile murder investigation. The crime scene yielded a few clues. No evidence was found of forced entry, and nothing of value was missing. Detectives examined Bob's extensive videotape collection, which led them to Carpenter, who had flown to Phoenix on June 25th to spend a few days with Bob. Carpenter's rental car was impounded and searched. Several blood smears were found that matched Bob's blood type. No one else of that blood type was known to have been in the car, including Carpenter. DNA testing was not yet available, and the Maricopa County attorney declined to file charges. In 1990, Scottsdale Police Detective Barry Vassall and Maricopa County Attorney's Office investigator Jim Raines re-examined the evidence from 1978 and persuaded the county attorney to reopen the case. DNA testing was inconclusive on the blood found in Carpenter's rental car, but Raines did discover an evidence photograph of the car's interior that appeared to show a piece of brain tissue. The actual tissue samples recovered from the car had been lost, but an Arizona judge ruled that the new evidence was admissible. In June 1992, Carpenter was arrested and charged with Bob's murder. At the 1994 trial, Bob's son Robert testified that in the weeks before his father's death, Bob had repeatedly expressed a desire to sever his friendship with Carpenter. He said that Carpenter had become a hanger-on and a nuisance to the point of being obnoxious. Quote, "My dad expressed that he just didn't need Carpenter kind of hanging around him anymore," unquote. Robert testified that Bob had called Carpenter the night before the murder and ended their friendship. Carpenter's attorneys attacked the prosecution's case as circumstantial and inconclusive. They presented evidence that Carpenter and Bob were still on good terms, including witnesses from the restaurant where the two men had dined the evening before the murder. They noted that the murder weapon had never been identified nor found. The prosecution's camera tripod theory was sheer speculation, they said, based solely on Carpenter's occupation. They disputed the claim that the newly discovered evidence photo showed brain tissue and presented many examples of sloppy work by police, such as the mishandling and misplacing of evidence, including the crucial tissue sample itself. They pointed out that Bob had been videotaped and photographed in sexual relations with numerous women, implying that any one of them might have been the killer. Other potential suspects proposed by the defense attorneys included angry husbands and boyfriends of the women and an actor who had sworn vengeance after a violent argument with Bob in Texas several months earlier. Carpenter was acquitted, and he continued to maintain his innocence until his death in 1998. After the trial, Robert speculated publicly that Olson, his father's widow, might have had a role in instigating the crime. Quote, "Nobody got a dime out of the murder," he said, "except for one person," unquote, alluding to Crane's will, which excluded him, his siblings, and his mother, with the entire estate left to Olson. He repeated his suspicions in the 2015 book, Crane, Sex, Celebrity, and My Father's Unsolved Murder. Maricopa County District Attorney Rick Romley responded, quote, "We never characterized Patty as a suspect," adding, "I am convinced John Carpenter murdered Bob Crane," unquote. Officially, Bob Crane's murder remains unsolved. In November 2016, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office permitted Phoenix television reporter John Hook to submit the 1978 blood samples from Carpenter's rental car for retesting, using a more advanced DNA technique than the one used in 1990. 2 sequences were identified, one from an unknown male, and the other 2 degraded to reach a conclusion. This testing consumed all of the remaining DNA from the rental car, making further tests impossible. Hook's investigation turned up 2 blood vials. Samples from Bob Crane and Carpenter located in evidence storage at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. Carpenter voluntarily gave a sample to Scottsdale Police when he was questioned in 1978. Bob's blood vial was recovered during his autopsy the day after the murder. Both were used as comparison samples for Hook's DNA test on the bloodstains found in Carpenter's rental car performed by Bode Cellmark Labs. Bob Crane's life and murder were the subject of the 2002 film Autofocus, directed by Paul Schrader and starring Greg Kinnear as Crane. The film, based on a book on Crane's murder written by Zodiac author Robert Graysmith, was described as brilliant by critic Roger Ebert. The film portrays Crane as a happily married, church-going family man who succumbs to Hollywood's celebrity lifestyle after becoming a television star. When he meets Carpenter, played by Willem Dafoe, and as a result of their friendship learns about then-new home video technology, he descends into a life of strip clubs, BDSM, and sex addiction. Crane's son with Olson, Scotty, challenged the film's accuracy in an October 2002 review. Quote, "During the last 12 years of his life," he wrote, "Bob went to church 3 times, when I was baptized, when his father died, and when he was buried," unquote. His son further stated that Bob was a sex addict long before he became a star, and that he may have begun recording his sexual encounters as early as 1956. There was no evidence, he said, that Bob engaged in BDSM. There were no such scenes of it in any of his hundreds of home movies, and Schrader admitted that the film's BDSM scene was based on his own experience while writing Hardcore. Before production on Autofocus was announced, Scotty and Olson had shopped a rival script alternatively titled F-Stop or Take Off Your Clothes and Smile, but interest ceased after Autofocus was announced. In June 2001, Scotty launched the website bobcrane.com. It included a paid section featuring photographs, outtakes from his father's sex films, and Crane's autopsy report that proved, he said, that his father did not have a penile implant as stated in Autofocus. The site was renamed Bob Crane, the official website, but it is now abandoned. The official Bob Crane website was maintained by CMG Worldwide. The website no longer exists.